There is a particular kind of silence that follows a woman when she has lost everything. Not the silence of mourning, which at least carries weight and draws the eyes of neighbors. This is the silence of invisibility, the quiet that settles over a person when the world has decided she is no longer worth the effort of being seen. Nora Calloway knows that silence well. She has been carrying it since St. Louis. The diligence rolls into Barrow Creek at noon on a Thursday in June of 1879, trailing a plume of red dust that coats every surface within reach: the planks of the boardwalk, the water trough by the livery stable, the faded canvas awning above Halbert's General Goods. The town is modest in the manner of frontier settlements, not small enough to feel intimate, not large enough to offer anonymity. Every face on the main street turns as the coach slows to a halt. Nora descends last, her single carpetbag held in both hands, the leather handle worn smooth from years of use. Her mother's hands first, then hers. Her dress is navy calico with careful patches at the elbows, stitched herself on the train through Missouri. Her boots meet the packed earth, and the left sole shifts under her foot, separating at the toe. She does not look down. She scans the platform for a face that matches the description she has memorized from the letter. She does not find it. What she finds instead is a lean man with close-set eyes and hair the color of old rust, standing at the edge of the platform with his hat in both hands. His smile is too careful to be genuine, the expression of someone who has rehearsed this conversation and found the rehearsal inadequate. "Miss Calloway." His voice is soft for a man his size, too soft. "Wade Greer. I ride for the Merritt Ranch." Nora looks past him. The platform is clear in every direction. "Mr. Merritt was to meet me himself." Something shifts behind Wade's expression, a window closing in a room she has not been invited to see. "Change of circumstances," he says. "Mr. Merritt sends his regrets." He turns his hat brim between his fingers in a slow rotation. "The arrangement won't be going forward." The words arrive one at a time, each settling over the previous like stones dropped into still water. Nora understands them. She does not allow her face to change. 3 steps away, leaning against the post of the freight office with an ease that belongs to a man who has nowhere pressing to be, stands a figure she will come to know. He is too well dressed for Barrow Creek, a wool coat despite the June heat, silver rings on both hands, hair oiled flat against a wide and ruddy face. He watches Nora with the unhurried interest of a man calculating the worth of something he has not yet decided whether to purchase. She does not know his name. She notes his face. "Is there a reason?" she says, keeping her voice below the range of nearby ears. "Or only the circumstances?" Wade spreads his hands in a gesture of helplessness he does not sell convincingly. "Couldn't say, ma'am. Just asked to pass the word." He puts his hat back on, touches the brim with 2 fingers in what passes for courtesy, and descends the platform steps before she can form another question. The crowd on the main street swallows him in 30 seconds flat. Nora stands with her carpetbag and the letter, and the very particular sensation of a floor giving way beneath her feet. Around her, Barrow Creek continues its business. 2 women near the dry goods store observe her with the frank assessment of people who have seen this situation before and reached their conclusions well ahead of the evidence. The man in the wool coat has not moved from his post. He is still watching. She counts what she has. The letter, which is now worthless paper. 37 cents, sufficient for 1 meal and no lodging. The address of a ranch 9 miles into a valley she has never seen, and a quality she does not have a proper name for. Not hope, which requires more certainty than this, but something adjacent to it. The refusal to lie down. She buys a meal at the boarding house on the south side of the street and asks a woman for directions. The woman gives her a long, measuring look before answering. That night, Nora sleeps in an abandoned barn 3 miles down the Barrow Creek Road, her carpetbag for a pillow, her shawl pulled tight against the cold that descends from the Wyoming hills the moment the sun clears the ridge. The straw smells of old horses and dry seasons. She lies awake long enough to understand the full shape of her situation, the distance, the money, the options that have narrowed to one. And then she closes her eyes. Morning assembles itself in the gaps between the barn boards. Grey first, then pale gold, then full light cutting in long stripes across the straw floor. Nora rises before the sun is properly up, shakes the dust from her skirt, picks up her bag, and begins walking east. The valley opens gradually. The road narrows to a rutted track, then to a suggestion of a track, winding through country unlike anything she has seen before. Wyoming grass runs brown at the tips and gold at the roots, moving in slow, long waves when the wind comes off the ridgeline. The hills here are wide and unhurried, the kind of landscape that does not make promises, does not offer shelter, and does not apologize for either. She walks for 2 hours. Her left boot sole shifts with every third step. That is when she hears it, high and rhythmic, coming from the east side of the road where a line of apple trees crowds against a split-rail fence. Not a bird. The sound has a pattern too precise for distress and too urgent for calm. A single note, repeated at exact intervals, as though the repetition itself is the only architecture holding something together. Nora sets her bag down in the road. She listens. Then she follows the fence line east until the trees open. The child is small, 7 years old at the outside, lying between the roots of the largest apple tree with her fists striking the earth in an unbroken, even rhythm. Her hair is the color of dark honey, completely tangled. Her eyes are open and aimed at the sky above her without seeing any of it. The only sound she makes is that single sustained note, exact and unwavering, as though she has been making it for a very long time. Nora does not call out, does not move toward her, does not look for another person to summon. She sits down on the ground 2 yards from the child, facing away. She has encountered this condition before. Not this child, but this particular state of being. A neighbor's boy in Ohio years ago. Her mother kneeling beside him in the yard. Don't crowd it. Don't fight what it's doing. Sit still and let it run its course. Nora picks up a small stone from the ground between the tree roots and rolls it slowly between her palms. A steady sound, barely audible, a rhythm set beneath the rhythm already present in the air. The child's fists slow, not quickly, not all at once, but degree by degree, the way a fire diminishes when the wind that was feeding it shifts direction and finds something else. The rhythm of the stone continues. 2 minutes, perhaps 5. The striking stops entirely. A long pause, in which the only sounds are the grass moving in the hills and the stone turning in Nora's palms. Then the child moves, not standing, but crawling on her hands and knees with the careful deliberation of a creature making a decision that matters. She reaches the edge of Nora's skirt. She stops. She puts her head down in Nora's lap and is still. Nora's hand hovers over the child's tangled hair for a moment. Then she lets it rest, gently, against the small, warm head. She doesn't do that. The voice comes from behind her, low, flat, carrying the particular evenness of a man who has removed feeling from his tone the way a carpenter planes a board, slowly over years, until the surface shows nothing. Nora does not turn. The sound of a horse settling its weight, then boots on dry ground, then silence and the understanding that whoever stands behind her has stopped and is waiting with a patience that comes from long practice. She turns her head enough to see him. Tall in the manner of men shaped by outdoor labor rather than intention, dark hair with silver growing at the temples, eyes nearly black, set in a face made angular by years of sun and something harder to name. His clothes are plain, faded at the shoulders, worn through at one knee. He holds his hat in his left hand and she sees without meaning to the scar across his palm, old and smooth, the width of a branding iron laid flat against skin. His gaze moves from the child to the carpetbag sitting in the road to the separation at the toe of Nora's boot. It is not a rude examination. It is the rapid inventory of a man who needs to understand a situation fully before he can act within it. "Caleb Merritt," he says. Nora holds his gaze. Nora Calloway. He looks at the child one more time. Then past Nora to the empty road behind her, the 9 miles of open valley between here and Barrow Creek. He puts his hat back on his head. "Come on, then." He picks up her carpetbag from the road without asking, turns toward the horse waiting at the fence, does not look back to see if she follows. Nora Calloway has, in the course of her 27 years, made a kind of peace with following people who do not explain themselves. She rises carefully so as not to disturb the child, and as she comes upright, She lifts Lily with her, the girl neither curling into her nor pulling away, simply permitting the movement with the neutral acceptance of someone accustomed to being carried along by forces she did not choose. It is while she shifts Lily against her hip and moves toward the fence that she sees it. The saddle. She knows leather. Her father worked in a harness shop in Ohio for 11 years, and she spent enough of her girlhood watching hides come in and finished goods go out to understand the difference between what a man requires and what a man selects. The saddle on Caleb Merritt's horse is not the saddle of a working rancher, 9 miles from the nearest town, living simply and sending apologies by proxy. The leather is deep chestnut, tooled along the skirt with fine line work, the stitching tight, and even in the way that only comes from craftsmen who charge a price to match their skill. She saw something comparable once, through a shop window in St. Louis, with a price card that represented 6 months of her father's wages. It does not match anything else she can see on Caleb Merritt. She says nothing. She stores it in the back of her mind where she keeps things she cannot yet explain but is not willing to forget. The ride to the ranch takes the better part of an hour. Caleb does not speak. Nora does not force conversation. The valley unfolds in every direction, a creek running along the northern fence line and catching the afternoon light in small, bright pieces, hills rising on both sides, a stand of cottonwood trees marking where the water bends. The ranch house appears at the end of a dirt track, 2 stories of weathered pine larger than she expected, with a full-width front porch and a red barn standing 20 yards to its left. The whole structure has the look of something built with intention. Not beautiful, but built for permanence. Whoever raised this house was not planning to leave it. A man is waiting on the porch. He comes to his feet when he sees them on the track, lean with close-set eyes and rust-colored hair that catches the late afternoon light. The same careful, too-even smile. Wade Greer. Nora watches his face as they approach. She watches his eyes move from Caleb's profile to hers, hold for precisely half a second longer than ease would require, and then settle back into the smooth surface of a man who has nothing to hide and knows how to make that apparent. North fence post is sorted, he tells Caleb, creeks running clear along the line. Caleb dismounts, hands the reins across without pausing, and moves toward the barn. Wade turns to Nora with the ready helpfulness of a man who has made helpfulness into a practiced habit. "Let me take that bag for you, ma'am." "I have it," she says. She carries it herself through the front door of the house where she was never expected, into the life that has not yet decided whether it will accept her. Behind her, small feet on the porch boards, Lily, following at a distance of exactly 3 steps, her fingers moving over the 5 smooth river stones in her apron pocket. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Outside, the Wyoming wind comes off the northern ridge and moves through the cottonwoods along the fence line, bending the tall grass in long, slow arcs. It sounds, Nora thinks, like something that has been holding its breath for a very long time and is only now beginning to let it go. The ranch does not explain itself to newcomers. It simply continues. In the hour before dawn, in the middle distance of every long afternoon, in the creek that runs cold along the north fence, regardless of who has arrived or departed. Nora understands this within the first morning. Caleb shows her the chicken coop at first light on a Friday, moving through it with the economy of a man who has performed each task 10,000 times and sees no reason to speak about what his hands already know. He holds a feed tin out to her, demonstrates once, the arc of the wrist, the scatter of grain, the way to keep the pail low against the hip so the hens cannot knock it sideways when they crowd forward. He does not narrate. He does not repeat himself. He sets the tin on the fence post and walks toward the barn. Nora watches him go, then she picks up the tin and feeds the chickens. The kitchen is next. The cast-iron stove requires 3 specific adjustments before it drafts properly. A damper that sticks unless you push left before pulling up, a firebox door that must be seated at an angle to catch. She figures both out by mid-morning without asking. The bread she produces that first day is dense and slightly undersalted. She eats it without complaint. Caleb eats his portion without comment. Progress, she decides, is a matter of accurate record-keeping. Wade Greer appears each morning with the punctuality of a man who wants his presence noticed. He brings coffee to the barn, offers to carry water from the creek, shows Nora where the tools hang in the shed with the helpfulness of a guide who has memorized a path, and is quietly proud of knowing it. She thanks him. She uses what he tells her. And she listens beneath the surface of his words for what he is actually doing. Because he asks questions that slide sideways into conversations like a blade worked under a door. Where does Mr. Merritt tend to ride on Tuesdays? Does he usually check the north pasture before or after midday? Has he mentioned anything about visitors from outside the county? Each question arrives wrapped in ordinary concern. Just keeping things running smoothly, ma'am, just making sure nothing gets missed. But Nora has spent 27 years in households where other people's intentions mattered to her survival. Wade carried himself with the quiet assurance of a man who believed he understood the limits of the people around him and had already accounted for them, and she has developed a particular sensitivity to the shape of what is not being said. She answers what she chooses to answer, and deflects the rest with the bland courtesy of a woman who does not yet understand the question. She stores every inquiry in the same place she keeps the saddle. The first week establishes the rhythms, the second reveals the music within them. Lily does not acknowledge Nora directly during those first 7 days. She moves through the house in her own precise orbits, the same path from bedroom to kitchen to porch, the same pause at the third step from the bottom of the stairs, fingers working through the 5 stones in her apron pocket with a concentration that shuts out everything around her. She does not look at Nora's face. She does not respond to her name when Nora speaks it. She eats only if her plate is placed at exactly the right position on the table, fork on the left side, cup exactly 2 finger widths from the rim. Nora learns the measurements by observation alone. She does not ask Caleb. She simply adjusts. On the 8th morning, she sets Lily's plate down with the cup at exactly 2 finger widths. Lily sits, eats the full meal for the first time since Nora arrived. Caleb watches from the doorway between the main room and the kitchen. He does not move. He does not speak. Something in his face shifts by the smallest possible degree, a tightening at the jaw that is not tension, but its opposite. The expression of a man releasing something he has held for a long time without knowing whether he could set it down. He goes back outside before Nora can turn around. By the 3rd week, Lily begins following her to the kitchen garden. Not close, always 3 to 4 yards back, moving parallel to Nora's path rather than behind it, like a second shadow cast by a different sun. She does not help. She does not observe with any expression Nora can read. But she is there, and there means something. The distance decreases by 1 yard over the following week. Then another. Caleb notices. Nora can feel the quality of his attention from across the yard, the stillness of a man who has learned to watch carefully from a distance, because that is the only way to see certain things without frightening them away. It is on a morning in the 4th week that she finds it. She has been pulling chicory that has spread beyond its bed along the far edge of the garden, when she notices the plant growing along the stone wall of the apple orchard, half hidden by grass, stems woody at the base and thin higher up, small white flowers barely visible against pale limestone. She recognizes it not by name but by configuration, the arrangement of the leaves, the way each flower sits against its calyx. Her mother's voice in memory, some 16 years back in the Ohio hills, that one pulls fever out of sick animals as sure as drawing water from a well. She harvests a careful handful, wraps the stems in a damp cloth, and brings them to the house. That afternoon she brews a tea from the dried flowers, mixed with chamomile from the garden, something light and slightly bitter, with a smell that settles Lily so visibly that the child falls asleep in the rocking chair on the porch before supper, hands loose in her lap, the 5 stones arranged in a neat row along the porch rail. Ruth Pickens arrives 2 days later in a buckboard wagon with a covered basket and the ease of someone who has never required an invitation. She is 63 years old and solid as a fence post sunk in good clay. White hair pulled back under a grey bonnet, eyes moving over Nora with the quick assessment of a woman who has lived long enough to form accurate opinions ahead of the evidence. "Ruth Pickens," she says. 6 miles west past the creek with the twin cottonwoods. She hands Nora the basket without being asked. "Brought cornbread. House needed it." They sit on the porch. Ruth drinks coffee. Lily comes and settles 3 steps away, not looking at either woman, her fingers moving through the 5 stones in their familiar count. When Nora brings out the sprig of white flowers, Ruth goes still. "Where did you find this?" "Along the orchard wall." Ruth takes the stem and holds it to the afternoon light, turning it slowly. Doc Harmon at the county seat would pay considerable for a steady supply. Half the ranches in the territory lost cattle last spring to relapsing fever. She lowers the stem and looks at Nora with an expression closer to respect than curiosity. "Where did you learn it?" "My mother kept a physic garden in Ohio. She was a midwife." Ruth is quiet a moment. Then she nods once, short and decisive, the movement of a woman who has made up her mind. "That's useful knowledge out here," she says. "More useful than most things people carry in from the east." Caleb comes around the corner of the barn, midway through Ruth's visit. He slows when he sees the buckboard, then continues toward the water trough with the deliberate unhaste of a man who is not avoiding something. Ruth watches him go with eyes that carry 40 years of knowing him. "He working you hard?" she asks. "No more than the work requires." Ruth makes a sound that might be approval. He's not a man that wastes effort on cruelty, just on silence. The men appear on a Wednesday afternoon. Nora sees them from the kitchen window. Two figures on horseback at the northern edge of the property, where the land flattens before the creek. They have dismounted. One holds a surveying rod. The other looks through an instrument mounted on a tripod, making adjustments with the deliberate precision of men recording measurements that will matter to someone else at a later hour. She goes to find Caleb. He is in the barn checking a shoe on the bay mare. He looks up when she appears in the doorway, and she tilts her head north. He straightens, moves to the barn window, and looks. His hands are still at his sides. His face does not register surprise. What it registers is older and more worn, the expression of a man who has seen a particular threat materialize on the horizon, enough times that the shock of it has long since been replaced by a dull, settled recognition. Like a farmer who knows which direction the bad weather comes from and has stopped expecting it to stay away. He says nothing. "Who are they?" Nora asks. He turns back to the mare's hoof. "Nobody that matters," he says. "Not yet." She looks at the two men one final time, the surveying rod, the tripod, the way they move with the purposeful efficiency of men executing someone else's errand, indifferent to who might be watching from the house. She returns to the kitchen without another word. That evening, Wade lingers near the back fence long after he should have gone to the bunkhouse. She can see the coal-orange glow of his cigarette from the kitchen window. It moves, pauses, moves again, tracing a slow path between the fence post and the barn door. She cannot tell what he is watching for, only that he is watching. She pulls the curtain across and lights the lamp for the night. 300 miles to the southeast, in a Denver office with a framed survey map covering the full breadth of the west wall, Douglas Crane writes a letter. He chooses his words with the patience of a man who understands that the distance between a proposal and a threat lies entirely in the arrangement of the phrasing. He has received word about the woman at the Merritt Ranch, her name, her circumstances on arrival, the absence of any formal contract, any document, any claim that a court would be obliged to honor. He folds the letter, presses the flat face of the silver ring on his right hand into the cooling wax, and sets it with the outgoing correspondence. In Barrow Creek, a woman named Hester Dodds receives a plain envelope with no return address and a sum of money that represents 3 weeks of ordinary work. She does not ask where it came from. 2 days later, she begins mentioning, with the gentle solicitude of a person sharing information she feels others deserve to have, that she has heard certain things about the woman living out at the Merritt place. Nothing she could be held to, nothing specific enough to refute, just the particular kind of knowledge that moves through a small town the way smoke moves through a closed room, gradually and then everywhere. Nora knows none of this yet. She sits at the kitchen table after supper, and by the light of the oil lamp writes Lily's name in careful letters on a scrap of brown paper, something to place at the child's spot at the table in the morning. A small mark, a declaration the size of a name that says, "This place is yours, and the person who sits here is known." Outside, the Wyoming dark settles over the valley without ceremony. The cottonwoods along the north fence murmur in the wind coming off the ridge. At the edge of hearing, something moves in the long grass near the creek. An animal, or the creek itself, or just the land doing what land does after the human sounds have stopped. From the porch comes the faint rhythmic creak of the rocking chair. Nora goes to the window without lighting the lamp. Caleb sits in the full dark with a cup of coffee cooling in his hands, his face turned north toward the fence line where the surveyors stood. He does not drink. He does not move. He simply watches the dark where the trouble lives, the way a man watches something he has decided he will not permit to take what remains. Nora lets the curtain fall back into place. She returns to the table and writes Lily's name one more time. Steadier now, the letters properly spaced, and sets the paper at the child's place for morning. The stranger arrives on a Tuesday. Caleb rides out to the north pasture before full light, the bay mare's hoofbeats fading into the pre-dawn silence. Wade takes the south fence line. The ranch settles into the emptiness of a house minding itself, just Nora at the stove and Lily at the kitchen table with her 5 stones arranged in a careful row. The hoofbeats on the front track arrive without warning. He is not a large man, but he carries himself with the ease of someone who does not expect doors to stay closed against him. Grey hat, a coat too heavy for June, hands loose on the reins. He ties his horse at the porch rail and comes up the steps without knocking, pushes the front door open, and walks 3 strides into the house before he registers Nora standing in the kitchen doorway. "Afternoon, ma'am. Looking for the Merritt operation." "You've found it. Mr. Merritt is not here." He looks past her, taking inventory of the rooms, the staircase, the spaces that belong to someone else. "I'll wait," he says. He is still looking past her when Lily appears at the end of the hallway. The child has a fixed path. Kitchen to back porch and return, walked in the same rhythm every morning for as long as she has walked anything at all. The stranger stands directly in it. She does not process the obstacle in time. She walks into a body and a shadow where neither has ever existed, and the world she depends on to remain consistent refuses, in that single instant, to hold. The sound builds from a single high note to something that fills the hallway completely. Her hands come up. Her heels strike the floor in that rapid, exact pattern, percussion aimed at restoring a rhythm the world has interrupted. The stranger takes a step back, looking at the child with the blank incomprehension of a man without a map for this territory. Nora moves past him in 4 strides. She does not reach for Lily. She drops to one knee between the child and the stranger and pulls the river stone from her apron pocket, a habit formed in the 2nd week, always a stone within reach, and sets a steady rhythm beneath the chaos. The slow roll of smooth rock between her palms, a sound Lily has learned to find inside a storm. "Get off this property," Nora says. She does not raise her voice. The man does not move fast enough. She rises and crosses to the fireplace in a dozen steps. The rifle comes off its hooks cleanly, stock to hip, barrel level, not raised but present. An argument that requires no elaboration. He leaves. Caleb returns before dark. She tells him plainly. The man, the arrival, Lily's crisis, the rifle used and replaced, the departure. She does not apologize for the outcome. She would not apologize for it even if she had possessed all the information she lacked at the time. He says nothing throughout. When she finishes, the silence that follows is a different category from his ordinary silences. Those are the quiet of a man who prefers space to sound. This is the particular stillness of a man holding something down by force of will alone. He looks at the rifle above the fireplace. That was Eleanor's. The name settles into the room the way a stone settles into deep water, without drama, without surface disturbance, disappearing straight to the bottom and changing the floor of everything. Eleanor. The word fills in the shape of what has been unnamed in this house since the first evening. The single rocking chair, the room at the top of the stairs that no one opens, the quality of absence that has become structural, load-bearing, built into the walls themselves. Nora holds his gaze. "I didn't know." "No," he says. "You didn't." He takes the rifle down from the hooks. He stands there a moment before moving, as if measuring the distance between memory and the present. Carries it upstairs without another word. Does not come back for supper. What follows cannot be called anger in any recognizable form. Caleb Merritt does not deal in the loose variety of anger that requires witnesses. What settles over the ranch instead is a cold formality. The exact observance of required tasks, two people moving through the same spaces with complete precision, and the total absence of the small habituations that had begun, quietly and without announcement, to make those spaces something other than parallel. He takes his coffee before she rises. He eats after she has cleared the kitchen. Lily registers the change within a day. She stops eating at her appointed hour. The cup placed at precisely 2 finger widths goes unacknowledged. She refuses the garden path, then her usual circuit of the house, retreating to the hallway at the top of the stairs, where she sits against the wall with her stones in an unending count that never quite settles. The low, constant hum of approaching distress begins appearing in the evenings, a pressure building behind a door that has no latch on this side. Nora recognizes it without needing to think. Her mother had said something similar once about a dog, about the way animals carry the emotional weather of a household in their bodies without choosing to and without any means of setting it down. Lily has no language for what is happening to her. She has only the hum and the stones and the shortened orbit of her days. The recognition costs Nora something real. The treatment she is receiving is not just, and she knows it is not just with a thorough and specific clarity. But Lily's stability requires a consistency she is capable of providing, and providing it means pressing her own anger down with enough regularity that it does not surface in her voice or her movements or the quality of silence she carries into a room. She acts for Lily, not for herself. There is a kind of strength that does not look like strength from the outside. This is one of its shapes. By the 4th day, the child returns to the garden, trailing Nora at her customary distance of 3 yards, fingers working through the stones in their familiar count. Nora does not permit the relief to reach her expression. It is the hens that warn her. 3 weeks of morning feeding have built in Nora a precise knowledge of their rhythms. Which birds lead, which follow, which positions in the yard belong to which temperament. On a Friday, she opens the coop to find the 2 youngest birds standing at the far end of the yard, in a posture she does not recognize as hunger or alarm, but as something anterior to both, the elevated stillness of creatures whose bodies know something their awareness has not yet named. She goes to the mineral salt block. The surface is wrong. She pauses a moment longer than necessary, comparing what she sees against memory, against other salts, other mixtures, before certainty settles in. A pale powder has been worked into the upper layer, barely visible against the white of the salt, but distinct in texture to a hand that has prepared medicines and remedies from raw materials since girlhood. Her mother's voice, rising unbidden from somewhere behind the sternum. They show it before it spreads. You have to be watching the ones closest to the source. She does not touch the block with bare hands. She takes a clean tin from the shed, scrapes the contaminated surface into it with a handled tool, stoppers it with a cork, and hides it behind the horseshoe nail supply in the far corner of the barn. She removes the entire salt block and replaces it from the store in the feed shed. Then she drains the water trough and scrubs it clean, carries creek water bucket by bucket until her shoulders burn and her skirt is soaked through, and the trough runs clear. The hens settle gradually. By mid-morning they move through the yard in their usual patterns, unhurried and indifferent. The young cattle in the adjacent pasture show no signs. She has reached it before it could travel past the coop. Caleb finds the drained trough and the empty mount on the coop wall that same afternoon. He examines both without approaching her directly. But when she passes the barn at dusk, he is standing in the doorway, and the look he gives her is not the look of a man maintaining a studied distance. It is the look of a man standing at the edge of a conclusion he has not yet decided he has earned the right to draw. "You saved the flock," he says, "and possibly more." He does not say, "and possibly more." But it is there in the pause, in the way his jaw works once before he turns back to the barn. The coldness between them does not break, but it shifts, by a single degree, in a single direction. She finds the map on a Saturday afternoon. She's moving a wooden crate in the far corner of the barn to reach the shelf where she has been drying herbs, the chamomile and the white-flowered plant from the orchard wall, bundled and hung since the 3rd week. The crate is heavier than its dimensions suggest. It has been shifted recently. The scrape marks in the dirt are fresh, not yet settled by dust. When she pulls it sideways, a folded paper drops from the gap between the crate and the wall, opens as it falls, and lies flat against the barn floor with the patient insistence of something that has been waiting some time to be discovered. It is a survey document, not a rough field sketch, a formally produced map on heavy paper, drawn in precise black ink with the even hand of someone trained to the work. The boundaries of the Merritt property are marked clearly in black, but red lines branch outward from those boundaries in both directions, extending north along the creek to a marker far beyond any fence line she has observed, then east along a ridge she cannot place, connecting at the northeastern corner to a secondary marking. There, stamped in red, a symbol, two overlapping circles with a vertical line through both. It carries the look of official notation, the kind produced by a government land office, not a rancher recording his own acreage in a private ledger. She kneels on the barn floor. The land outlined in red is not a modest working ranch in a Wyoming valley. Whatever the Merritt property truly represents, it has dimensions that do not correspond to plain clothes and a kitchen table with two unmatched chairs. She looks at it long enough to commit the symbol and the general proportions to memory. The red lines, the creek heading north, the ridge running east. Then she folds the map exactly as it was, returns it to the gap, and pushes the crate back against the wall. She carries her dried herbs to the house. She sets them on the kitchen shelf in the order she needs them. She does not ask anyone about what she has seen. Some questions announce themselves in the asking. This one needs the right door. It needs the right moment. And it needs, above all, the right amount of what she already knows before she can ask it properly. Outside, the evening light withdraws from the valley in long, slow stages, the cottonwoods along the north fence going dark before the sky above them does. Lily sits on the porch with her 5 stones arranged in a row along the rail. The hum she makes is low, and even now, not the hum of distress but the other one, the quieter one, the sound she makes when the world has settled back into the shape she needs it to hold. Nora stands at the kitchen window and watches the child count her stones in the fading light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The rifle is not where she left it. This is the first thing Nora registers on Monday morning. The empty hooks above the fireplace, the faint outline on the wall where the stock and barrel rested for what must have been years before she arrived. Caleb carried it upstairs 4 days ago and has not brought it back. She does not ask about it. She rebuilds the fire and sets the coffee on and moves through the morning with the steady attention of a woman who has decided that the measure of any day is how much useful work she can complete inside it. She is oiling the kitchen table, a weekly task, linseed applied with an old cloth in long even passes, when she hears him on the stairs. He stops in the doorway between the main room and the kitchen. She does not turn. She continues the long, slow stroke from one end of the table to the other, the cloth moving in straight, unhurried lines. He crosses the room. She hears the chair legs scrape. Not her chair, the other one, which she has not sat in since she understood which chair was whose. He sets something on the table. It is the rifle. She looks at it. Then she finishes the current pass of the cloth before she lifts it. She checks the barrel the way her mother's neighbor taught her once in Ohio, the spring he spent keeping the farm safe while his boys were away, angled toward the window, looking for obstruction. She checks the action. The wood is dry at the forestock. She sets the rifle down, goes to the shelf where she keeps the tin of linseed, comes back, and begins working the oil into the wood with the same unhurried method she applied to the table. A single pass. Let it sit. Another pass. Caleb watches her hands. She brought it from Pennsylvania, he says. It is not an explanation. It is a man releasing a single weight from a load he has carried alone long enough. Wedding trip, coming west. Said it was her father's. Said she'd feel better knowing it was in the house. Nora does not fill the pause that follows. She has learned the topography of his silences and knows the difference between one that is finished and one that has more ground to cover. She was afraid of this place. He says it without judgment. The space of it, the quiet at night. He looks at the window, at the wide, flat morning outside. She never stopped being afraid of it. Nora sets the rifle on the table between them. The wood has a sheen now, a little life returned to it. I didn't know what it was, she says. I would not have touched it. I know, he says. You treated it the way a person treats something that matters. He takes the rifle, carries it back to the hooks above the fireplace, seats it in its place with careful hands. does not look at her when he speaks again. Her name was Eleanor. She died 2 years and 9 months ago. I don't speak of it often. A breath. That's the entirety of what I'll say about it. That's enough, Nora says. He goes outside. The door closes behind him with its ordinary sound. A sound that is, for the first time since the incident with the stranger in the hallway, the sound of a door simply closing, rather than a signal of something sealed against her. Lily returns to the garden on Wednesday. Not tentatively, at her full 3-yard distance with the same parallel tracking she practiced in the second week, fingers cycling through the 5 stones in their familiar count. But she is there. The garden path between the house and the herb beds exists again inside her orbit, and the word for that, Nora understands, is restoration. The ranch has re-established its axis. The things that required the axis to function have resumed accordingly. Caleb eats dinner at the same table on Thursday evening, does not speak much. Nora does not press for more than is offered. But when he takes a second portion of the bean stew without being invited to, she recognizes it for what it is. The ordinary gesture of a man who has decided to stay in the room. She has plans she has not shared with him. Ruth Pickens has agreed to come Friday morning. Agreed by way of the note Nora sent with the grain delivery boy 2 days prior, a thing she managed in the early hours before Caleb was about. She trusts Ruth's discretion in the way she trusts a well-tested rope. Not blindly, but with the specific confidence of a woman who has been watching another woman's judgment for 4 weeks and found it consistent. Ruth will sit with Lily on Friday. Nora will go to Barrow Creek. She does not tell Caleb. She is not asking permission. She is making arrangements. What changes her timetable is the thing she sees on Thursday night. She cannot sleep. It happens sometimes. The old Ohio habit of lying awake, tallying the distance between where she is and where she had expected to be at 27. She has gotten better at not doing it. But the night after the rifle conversation is too full of things to process, and at some point near midnight she gives up and sits at the bedroom window with her shawl around her shoulders and the Wyoming dark spread out below. The coal-orange point of a cigarette moves near the north fence. She watches it. Wade takes his smoke on the east side of the barn on ordinary evenings. She has noted the position of the glow enough times to know its habitual location. This position is different. This is the far corner of the property, where the fence line meets the beginning of the creek brush and the darkness is deepest. Something moves in the darkness adjacent to the cigarette. A second figure. Then the brief flare of a match, shielded quickly, illuminating 2 faces for less than 2 seconds before the cupped hands close over it. She does not move from the window. She watches the exchange with the stillness of someone who understands that being seen would end something that needs to continue. The second man carries something Wade gives him, folded paper, from the size and manner of handling. He puts it inside his coat. Then a second item, longer, the dimensions of a surveyor's document rather than a letter. He puts that inside as well. They separate. The second man goes north along the creek brush on foot. The cigarette glow moves back toward the bunkhouse in no apparent hurry. Nora goes to the small writing table in the corner of her room. She lights the lamp low, below the level of the window. Then she sits down and writes, from memory, in the careful, precise hand of a woman who was taught to record exactly what she saw, and nothing more, a full account of the exchange, the time, the location relative to the fence post, a description of the second man sufficient to identify him, tall, narrow-shouldered, a hat with a dented crown, the 2 items, the direction of his departure. She writes the details of the access map she suspects Wade was providing, the timing of Caleb's north pasture rides, the position of the creek crossing, the gap in the fence line she overheard Wade mention once in passing as needing repair. She writes the symbol from the survey document she found in the barn, redraws it as closely as she can recall, 2 overlapping circles with a vertical line through both. She seals the pages inside the back cover of her mother's herb journal, which lives at the bottom of her carpet bag, beneath the spare dress. Then she puts out the lamp, returns to the window, and watches the creek brush until there is no more motion in the dark. Ruth arrives at first light on Friday with her buckboard, and a calmness about the change of plan that suggests she requires very little explanation to understand a situation. She examines Lily for half a minute and exchanges a look with Nora that contains everything that needs to be said. "We'll be fine," Ruth says. "The child and I understand each other well enough." Nora has packed the pages inside the herb journal. She has put on her better dress, the grey cotton less worn at the elbows, and tightened the laces of her boots as far as the separated sole will permit. She has calculated the 9 miles. She is off the porch and down the track before the sun clears the eastern ridge. 9 miles on the Barrow Creek Road is a particular form of education. The first 3 are easy, the body still warm from sleep, the mind clear. The middle 3 strip away whatever was unnecessary. The final 3 are a conversation between will and ground, and the ground is not kind about it. By the time the false fronts of Barrow Creek appear over the low rise to the west, her boots have done damage she will feel for a week, and her jaw is set with the particular expression of a woman who has decided that the discomfort is simply part of the decision. She goes directly to the law office above the hardware store. She has been there once before in her second week, a brief visit on a supply trip, to file a minor records question about the property boundary for Caleb, who sent her with a signed note and specific instructions. She remembers the man at the desk, spare, careful spoken, with the unhurried manner of someone who understands that the words in a document will outlast everyone in the room where they are written. His name is Mr. Aldous Pratt. He is at his desk when she enters. He looks at her over his spectacles with the measured expression of a man who does not waste first reactions. She sits across from him and places the pages on the desk between them. She says, "I need you to look at what I've brought before I tell you why I've brought it." He looks at them. He reads without comment. When he reaches the redrawn symbol, he pauses. He sets his pen down with a deliberateness that has nothing to do with the pen. "Where did you see this marking?" "On a survey document, folded inside a crate in the Merritt barn." He is quiet for a moment. Outside, the main street of Barrow Creek moves through its ordinary Friday business. A wagon, a pair of horses at the trough, someone sweeping a boardwalk. None of it enters the room. "That symbol," Pratt says, "is the registration mark of the Territorial Land Office. It designates a primary water rights concession, original grant, not purchased." He leans back in his chair. The Merritt concession was filed in 1861 by Caleb Merritt's father. It covers the Barrows Fork tributary from its headwaters to its southern junction. He pauses. There is a branch of the Pacific Meridian Railroad currently being planned through this region. Without the water rights attached to that tributary, their proposed station at the Hollow Creek crossing cannot be built. The branch would need to reroute by 30 miles to reach the next viable water source. Nora sits with this information. She has understood, in pieces for some time, that the land was worth more than its surface implied. But the shape of it had not been complete until this moment, and now it assembles itself with the precise finality of a structure finding its last load-bearing element. "The man who delivered the cancellation notice when I arrived," she says. "The man named Wade Greer on the Merritt property. He works for whoever wants those rights." Pratt nods slowly. "That would be consistent with what you've brought me." She looks at him steadily. "I have seen the sheriff exchange considerable warmth with Douglas Crane on 2 separate occasions." Another pause. Pratt's expression does not change, but something in it settles. A decision made between one breath and the next. "Then it is fortunate," he says, "that you came here." He takes the pages. He makes copies in his own hand, returns the originals to her, and files the copies in a leather folder that goes into the locked drawer below his desk. They agree on a date in 2 weeks for the cattle auction in Barrow Creek, where the county clerk will be present and the conditions will be, as Pratt frames it, appropriate for certain matters to be addressed in the presence of witnesses. She thanks him. He nods once, rises, and opens the door. She descends to the street and turns east. The 9 miles back are no shorter than the 9 miles there, but the walk has a different quality now, not the forward press of urgency, but the longer, more sustained motion of someone who has done what needed doing and has nothing left to do until the time arrives. She reaches the ranch in the long golden light of late afternoon. Ruth's buckboard is still at the fence. Lily sits on the porch steps with her stones in a row, counting from left to right and then back. She does not look up at Nora's arrival, but as Nora climbs the porch steps, the child shifts, barely perceptibly, 2 inches to the left, leaving room on the step beside her. Nora sits down. The step is narrow. Their shoulders are almost touching. "Good evening, Lily," Nora says. The child says nothing. But her counting continues, and it is the quieter kind. The sound that means the world has held its shape for one more day. Inside, from the sound of the barn, Caleb moves through the evening chores in his steady, unhurried way. Wade works the water trough at the far end of the yard. He does not know she has been to town. He does not know what is sitting in a locked drawer above the hardware store on Barrow Creek's main street. He does not know that the woman he helped strand on a platform 4 weeks ago walked 9 miles this morning and 9 miles back on a separated soul, and that the locked drawer contains the precise record of everything he did under cover of Thursday night. The Wyoming dusk takes its time about settling, as it always does, the sky holding its color long after the light has gone practical, the cottonwoods along the creek going from green to black in their own slow order. Nora watches it from the porch step. She does not look at Wade. She looks at the horizon where the last color is fading out of the sky, and she breathes the sage and dry grass smell of the valley, and she waits with the patience of someone who has learned, in the long, hard school of having nothing, that the most important things move at the pace of the land, not the pace of urgency. They always get there eventually. The morning of the auction arrives with the particular quality of days that have been building toward themselves for some time. A stillness in the pre-dawn air, a clarity to the light coming over the eastern ridge that makes every object in the yard stand at its own sharp edge. Nora is dressed before the household stirs, the grey cotton dress, her better one, taken from the carpet bag the night before and hung on the doornail to let the travel creases fall. Her boots have been resoled. Caleb left them outside her door 10 days ago, the separated sole pegged and stitched tight. No note, no mention of it at supper that evening. She laces them now with the attention of a woman preparing for terrain she cannot fully predict. Ruth Pickens arrives at first light as agreed. She comes down from the buckboard with the efficiency of a woman who has somewhere to be, and the wisdom to arrive early anyway. She hands Nora a folded piece of oilcloth containing cornbread without being asked. Her eyes move between Nora and the front door of the house, and she says nothing that needs to be said aloud. Lily is in the kitchen with her stones, not agitated, simply present in the way she is present when the world is running in its expected channels. Nora crouches to her eye level without attempting to catch her gaze. "I'll be back before supper," she says. "Ruth is here. You know Ruth." Lily's fingers move through the stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "She'll have the garden and the porch and the afternoon light," Nora continues, as if narrating the day's shape will secure it. Perhaps it does. Perhaps the child hears more than she can answer. "Nothing is different except I'm not in it." She presses her palm briefly to the kitchen table, the solid, ordinary wood of it, and straightens. Ruth settles into the chair by the window, with the ease of a woman accustomed to other people's houses. Lily does not look up when Nora goes. The ride to Barrow Creek is the first Nora has made beside Caleb. He has the buckboard hitched and waiting when she comes off the porch. He holds out a hand. Not a statement, not a gesture of any identifiable significance, simply the practical assistance of a man who knows the step up to the bench is high and the soil is still soft from last week's rain. She takes it. The hand is what she expected. Large, calloused, the scar on the left palm a ridge beneath her fingers for a half-second before they separate. He clicks his tongue. The horse moves forward. The ranch falls away behind them in its slow, familiar order. The red barn, the cottonwoods, the north fence line with the creek running cold beyond it. The 9 miles pass, mostly in silence. Not the earlier silence, which had weight and deliberate distance. This is the silence of two people traveling together, who have discovered they do not require sound to occupy the same space. Once, near the creek crossing, he says, "Pratt will be there." She does not ask how he knows she has been to town. There had been small absences in the previous days, the missing hours, the altered rhythm of the house, and Caleb Merritt was not a man who missed changes in patterns that belonged to his own land. She does not ask how he knows she has spoken to Pratt. She simply says, "Yes." He does not ask what was in the pages she brought. She does not explain. The wagon wheels grind on, and the Wyoming morning opens wide on either side of the road. What Nora does not know, what she will understand only in the hours ahead, is that Caleb Merritt has not attended a Barrow Creek cattle auction in 3 years. The last time he rode this road toward the main street, Eleanor had been dead for 6 months, and he had come in to settle an account and left before anyone could offer condolences he had no room to receive. 3 years of sending hired hands in his place. 3 years of dispatching others to represent what belongs to him. Today he drives the wagon himself. The town will notice. The town notices everything. Barrow Creek wears its auction day like a good coat brought out for company. The main street is full by mid-morning. Wagons hitched 3 deep along the rails. Buyers and sellers moving between the pen corrals set up behind the livery stable, the boarding house already serving coffee through the window on a tray. Children run between the adults' legs. Dogs negotiate their own competing interests near the water trough. 2 horses at the east rail carry saddlebags stamped with a brass fitting Nora recognizes from a freight company advertisement she saw once in a St. Louis newspaper. The horses are too good for local ownership. Their riders, standing near the pen fence in conversation with Douglas Crane, are dressed with the subtle expense of men whose clothes were made for offices and adapted imperfectly for the outdoors. Denver men. Crane sees Caleb and Nora arrive. His expression cycles through something, an adjustment, a recalculation, before it settles back into the easy confidence of a man who has prepared for multiple arrangements and is comfortable with any of them. He touches the brim of his hat in Caleb's direction, a greeting as thin as paper, carrying the social form without the content. Caleb ties the horse and does not return the gesture. Nora steps down from the wagon without assistance and keeps Crane's position in her peripheral vision as she moves. He has a leather satchel under one arm. He is moving through the crowd with the unhurried efficiency of a man who has an errand to complete and has arranged the conditions for its completion. She finds Pratt near the dry goods store without needing to look for him. He is beside a man she has not met, the county clerk, present for the official recording of sale transactions, a small man with ink-stained fingers who has the absent-minded precision of someone perpetually performing 2 tasks simultaneously. With Pratt stands a third figure she did not expect, the circuit judge in Barrow Creek 3 days early for a matter Pratt has apparently taken steps to arrange. Pratt meets her eyes, nods once. Everything is in place. The auction runs its ordinary business for the better part of an hour. Cattle change hands. Numbers are called. Men at the pen fence argue briefly over the merits of particular animals and reach agreements calibrated to the precision of the dollar. Crane waits. She can see him timing it, the quality of patience that belongs to a man who has chosen his moment in advance. He waits until the auction's formal business reaches a natural pause, until the county clerk's table is clear, and the crowd is milling between transactions, and the circuit judge is visible near the hardware store steps. Until the largest collection of witnesses is present without being gathered, then he approaches the county clerk's table. His voice carries with the practiced projection of a man who wants an audience without appearing to seek one. "I have a document requiring the county clerk's acknowledgement," he announces, "a formal attestation of employment status relevant to a property matter in this county." He removes from the satchel a folded paper sealed with the impression of a silver ring. He opens it, sets it on the table. The woman residing at the Merritt property arrived in Barrow Creek as a day-wage domestic, engaged by Mr. Merritt in the capacity of household help and child management. This document establishes her status for the purposes of any future claims or legal proceedings touching on the Merritt land holdings. The crowd is not entirely listening. Then it is. "No formal marriage has been contracted," Crane continues. "No legal partnership of any recognized standing. The woman holds the status of an employee, compensated labor, with no claim, implied or explicit, upon the property or its appurtenant rights. The document lies on the county clerk's table." The 2 Denver men have moved to positions on either side of the crowd's outer edge, not conspicuously, but present. The circuit judge has turned from the hardware store steps. Nora does not move from where she stands. Somewhere behind her thoughts, she measures time the way Lily does, in steady intervals in things that must not be disrupted, and she holds herself inside that same rhythm. Into the pause that follows, from near the dry goods store, walks Aldous Pratt. He moves without haste to the county clerk's table and sets down his own leather folder. He does not look at Crane. He addresses the circuit judge with the clarity of a man who has selected his words before entering the room. Your Honor, I have here a sworn account witnessed and dated of deliberate contamination of a working water source on the Merritt property, a criminal act under territorial statute. I have additionally a detailed record of unauthorized survey activity conducted on Merritt land without the owner's knowledge or consent, documented by an eyewitness and corroborated by physical evidence currently held in my office. I would ask that you receive these materials and determine whether a hearing is warranted. He sets the folder open on the table beside Crane's document. The eyewitness, he says, is present. Every face in the radius of 20 feet turns. Nora takes 4 steps forward. She does not look at the crowd, she looks at the judge. I saw the contamination of the water source, she says. I have the tin containing the removed material. I saw the exchange of access documents at the north fence on the night of the 14th. I can describe the man who received them. Crane's composure holds. He has the face of a man with contingency plans, a man who has moved enough pieces on enough tables to know how to wait out a setback. The account of an employee with no standing to speak to property matters, he begins. Bring Wade Greer forward, the circuit judge says. Silence. Then the sound of a man being located in a crowd by people who have reason to find him quickly. Wade emerges at the outer edge of the group, rust-colored hair, close-set eyes, the expression of a man who has been preparing a neutral face and is discovering the preparation is not adequate. Pratt places 2 sheets on the table. These are access maps of the Merritt property, recovered from a location designated in the eyewitness account. The handwriting can be examined. Additionally, I have here correspondence establishing a direct financial relationship between Mr. Greer and the Pacific Meridian Land Acquisition Office, conducted over a period of 14 months. Wade looks at the papers. His jaw shifts. Something behind his eyes performs a rapid, internal accounting. That's a lie, he says. But the voice that says it is the voice of a man who has run out of road. The circuit judge steps to the county clerk's table. He reads the contamination account. He reads the access map provenance. He reads the correspondence dates against the timeline Pratt has assembled. He does not rush. The crowd around him goes so quiet that the pen cattle can be heard shifting and stamping 30 yards away. The sheriff of Barrow Creek stands at the edge of the assembled witnesses. He knows what everyone watching can see. The circuit judge is present, the documentation is in order, and the one thing he cannot afford is to be on the visible wrong side of a federal railroad land scheme in front of every landholder in the county. He walks to Wade Greer with the expression of a man swallowing something that does not agree with him. Come with me, he says. Crane takes 1 step back, then another. The Denver men have begun moving toward their horses with the purposeful casualness of men recalculating a journey. The circuit judge lifts his eyes from the papers and looks at Douglas Crane with the particular attention of the law settling its focus on an object it has found sufficient cause to examine. Mr. Crane, he says, I would ask you to remain available. What Caleb Merritt does next, he does without drama. He has been standing 8 feet from the county clerk's table throughout. He has not spoken. He has not moved. He watched Crane make his play and watched Pratt answer it, and watched the sheriff lead Wade away through the crowd, and through all of it, his face carried the expression of a man who waited a long time for something to arrive, and is not surprised to find it exactly as he expected. He walks to the county clerk's table. The county clerk, who has been looking at the accumulated documents with the expression of a man whose ordinary Friday has exceeded its expected dimensions, looks up. Caleb reaches into the interior pocket of his coat and removes a folded document, old paper, creased with years of careful storage, its edges soft with handling. He opens it on the table. The registration mark at the top is the same symbol Nora drew from memory 3 weeks ago. 2 overlapping circles, a vertical line through both. I want to file a formal public registration of the Merritt water rights concession, he says. Primary grant, Barrows Fork tributary, original filing 1861. I want it registered publicly on the county record today. The county clerk reaches for his pen. Caleb lets him write. The pen scratches across the ledger. Around them, the crowd holds its position, pressed together by the gravity of watching something settle into permanence. The county clerk finishes the first entry, looks up. Caleb speaks 2 sentences. The first is the registration of the water rights. The second, spoken in the same even unaltered voice, as though it requires no greater announcement, adds a name to the title of the Merritt property. Nora Calloway, the county clerk writes. The pen makes its marks on the county ledger. The marks dry in the June air. The Denver men are gone from the rail. Crane has not moved. He stands at the edge of the dispersing crowd with his leather satchel and his silver rings, and the particular expression of a man who has built a careful architecture and watched it come apart in an afternoon, not spectacularly, not all at once, but joint by joint, load-bearing piece by load-bearing piece, until the structure that remains is not one he can shelter inside any longer. Caleb turns from the table. He does not look at the crowd. He looks at Nora. He holds her gaze for the duration of a single long breath, long enough to contain everything that neither of them has said in the 8 weeks since he found her sitting on the ground in an apple orchard with his daughter's head in her lap. Then he walks past her toward the wagon. "We should get back," he says. "Lily's had enough of Fridays without her routine." Nora falls into step beside him. The crowd parts without being asked. Behind them on the county clerk's ledger, the ink finishes its drying. The entry reads exactly as he spoke it. 2 names, 1 property, 1 water right that 300 miles of railroad cannot route around, registered in public in daylight in front of every living soul in Barrow Creek, who will carry this afternoon home and set it down at their own supper tables by evening. The wagon rolls east toward the valley. The auction resumes behind them, finding its ordinary rhythms again. The way water finds its level after a stone has passed through it. The afternoon sun leans west over the ridge. The cottonwoods along the creek appear first, then the red barn, then the house with its 2 upstairs windows catching the light. On the porch steps, a small figure sits counting 5 stones. She does not look up at the sound of the wagon. But as the wheels slow at the gate and Nora steps down from the bench, the child rises from the step, stands, smooths her apron, and walks forward to the gate with her stones in her pocket and her tangled hair loose around her face. She stops 2 feet away. Her eyes do not meet Nora's, but her hand comes out, fingers open, the 5 stones resting in her palm, offered with the matter-of-fact gravity of someone extending the most significant thing they possess. "Those are yours," Nora says softly. "You keep those." Lily is still for a moment. Then she closes her fingers around the stones and walks back to the porch steps and sits back down. Caleb stands at the horse's head, unbuckling the harness. He does not look at either of them, but his hands slow for a moment on the buckle, just a moment, before they resume their work. The valley holds the evening light longer than most places have any right to. The consequences arrive not all at once, but in the manner of a structure that has lost its foundation, piece by piece, in the order determined by what was load-bearing and what was merely decorative. Douglas Crane does not leave Barrow Creek immediately. He remains 4 days in the boarding-house room he has occupied for 18 months, and in those 4 days he conducts himself with the measured composure of a man who has not yet admitted the full extent of what has shifted. He sends 2 letters to Denver. He receives no reply. On the 5th day, the circuit judge, still present in the county for the hearing he has initiated, sends a deputy to the boarding house with a formal summons. Crane descends the stairs with his leather satchel and his silver rings, and the expression of a man who has decided that dignity, at least, is something he can choose to keep. The county charges are specific: deliberate contamination of a private water source with intent to deprive, an offense under territorial statute that carries weight commensurate with how dependent this landscape is on water. The Pacific Meridian, receiving the circuit judge's inquiry by telegram, responds within the week. Douglas Crane is no longer associated with the Pacific Meridian Railroad Company. The letter is formal and absolute and contains no expression of surprise. Organizations of a certain size are capable of severing a limb with the clean efficiency of a man who has practiced the motion. Wade Greer is tried at the county seat in August. The evidence is sufficient, without requiring elaboration. The correspondence, the access maps in his own hand, the eyewitness account of the exchange at the north fence. He receives a sentence proportional to what he did and is removed from the territory. The bunkhouse at the Merritt Ranch stands empty through September. Caleb fills the chores himself, as he did in the years before Nora arrived, and does not appear diminished by the additional weight. The Pacific Meridian redirects its branch. The rerouting adds 31 miles to the planned line and shifts the next proposed station away from Barrow Creek entirely. The town absorbs this in the manner of communities that have survived enough disappointments to have developed a working vocabulary for them. But there is a layer of feeling beneath the resignation, directed not at the railroad, which everyone understands to be indifferent, but at the Merritt Ranch, which sits on the rights that proved immovable. Men at the hardware store say nothing specific. Women at the dry goods counter find reasons to look elsewhere when Nora passes. The resentment is the shapeless kind, which makes it durable. Caleb is aware of it. He does not comment on it. He has the stillness of a man who made his decision with full knowledge of this particular consequence and found the price acceptable. Nora is also aware of it. She finds it harder because she has not yet built the calluses that come from belonging to a place long enough to have earned its resentment. But she continues. She tends the garden. She dries the herbs. She sends the first supply of white-flowered chamomile to Doc Harmon through the supply wagon and receives in return a note written in a physician's cramped hand that says the material is superior to what he has sourced elsewhere, and he would take all she can produce. She does not tell Caleb about the note immediately, but she sets it on the kitchen table where he will find it, and in the morning it is gone, and a new trowel is leaning against the garden fence post, the handle smooth and properly fitted, the blade clean. She does not comment on the trowel. He does not comment on the note. This is the language they have learned. It is a Tuesday in late August. The morning has the quality of the best Wyoming mornings, cool enough that the garden work is a pleasure rather than a contest, the light coming in at an angle that makes every ordinary thing look considered. Nora is on her knees at the rosemary bed, clearing the last of the summer's aggressive weed growth from between the woody stems, her hands dark with soil to the wrist and her hair escaping its braid in the reliable manner it has adopted since she stopped fighting it. Lily moves along the far edge of the garden, not her usual parallel tracking, something looser today, less prescribed, a quality of motion that Nora has begun to recognize as Lily at ease rather than Lily navigating. The child has been different in small ways since the morning of the auction. Nothing catalogued, nothing that would be visible to someone who had not been watching for 8 weeks. But the stones come out of the pocket less frequently in the evenings. The hum of distress has not appeared in nearly 2 weeks. She eats at her place with the cup at 2 finger widths, but twice she has moved the cup herself, a fractional adjustment, asserting preference rather than only accepting it. Growth moves in a direction the eye cannot track directly. You see it only when you step back. Nora is not stepping back. She is working the garden with the focused attention of a woman who knows that chamomile needs to be cut before it goes to seed if the oils are to hold. She clips with the small scissors she keeps in her apron pocket. She works down the row toward the far bed. Lily is somewhere behind her when it happens, a single sound, short, approximate. The consonants imprecise, the vowels slightly compressed. The word shaped by a mouth that has not practiced forming words and so approaches the shape of the thing phonetically rather than by habit. But the shape is unmistakable. Nora. It comes out as 2 distinct syllables, neither quite right, but both pointing in the same direction. Nora's scissors stop. She does not turn. She holds perfectly still with the deliberate self-discipline of a woman who understands that turning too quickly, reacting too visibly, might be the thing that closes the door that has just, for the first time, opened. She breathes in through her nose. The garden smells of chamomile and damp soil and the sage that grows along the western wall. She breathes out. After a moment, she resumes cutting. She does not know that Caleb is on the porch. She does not know that he has been standing there for 10 minutes with a cup of coffee that has gone cold in his hand, or that he heard the sound from across the full width of the yard with the acuity of a man who has been listening for his daughter's voice for 2 years and 9 months. She does not see his face. She does not see the thing that moves through it, swift, private, enormous, before it passes and leaves behind something quieter and more permanent in its place. She only feels some minutes later the familiar quality of his attention from across the yard. She does not turn to meet it. She keeps her eyes on the chamomile and lets the moment belong to him. Some things do not require witnesses to be real. He knocks on her bedroom door after supper. She has never heard him knock on anything in the house. Doors are either open or closed in his understanding of interior space, and the distinction has always been sufficient. She comes to the door with the lamp in her hand. He is holding a key. "There's something upstairs I should have shown you sooner," he says. He says it in the manner of a man delivering a verdict on himself, which is the only form of self-assessment he appears willing to make. She follows him up the stairs to the end of the hall. The door that has been closed since her first evening in this house opens with the particular sound of a hinge that has not been exercised in a very long time, a long, low complaint that is also a kind of release. He raises the lamp he carries and steps inside first. The room is an office, not a bedroom kept sealed in grief. She had wondered in the early weeks if it was Eleanor's things she was being kept from. But this room belongs to an earlier generation. A wide desk of dark walnut, its surface bare and slightly dusty. A single chair. Bookshelves along the left wall carrying ledger books with dates on their spines going back to the 1850s. On the right wall, maps, survey maps, plat maps, a hand-drawn topographic rendering of the valley, and the ridge lines on both sides. Mounted alongside them, a framed photograph, a family, formally posed, the year 1862 written in ink at the bottom. A man and a woman and a boy of perhaps 10 years old with dark hair and an expression that is already acquiring the quality Nora knows now as an adult face. Beneath the desk, pulled to the center of the floor at some recent point, a flat wooden box. He opens it. Inside, in a leather envelope sealed with a cord, the documents. The original water rights concession, the survey records for the Eastern Ridge, and a second envelope, this one thinner, containing a registration document in faded ink whose subject matter Nora now knows to interpret, a mineral claim, Barrows Fork, East Ridge, filed 1863, never publicly acknowledged. She looks at the map on the wall. The red survey lines she saw in the barn document are here in the original, drawn by the hand of the man in the photograph. He found the silver the year after the war ended, Caleb says. He didn't trust the men coming in from the east with their instruments and their company names. He said a man who announces what he has is a man who's already given half of it away. He pauses. I kept his method. Wasn't certain it was right, wasn't certain it wasn't. Nora looks at the photograph, then at Caleb. You were 10, she says. 11. It was taken in the autumn. She looks at the room, the accumulated gravity of it, the years of careful silence that the closed door contained. He did not seal off a room out of grief. He sealed off a room that held the specific weight of everything he was responsible for and could not afford to make visible. She understands the difference. She does not say everything the room makes her feel. She picks up the lamp and looks at the plat map on the wall with the attention of a woman who has earned the right to understand what her name is now attached to. The mineral claim, she says. Has anyone registered it officially? No. That might be the next reasonable step. He looks at her for a moment. I reckon it might, he says. They leave the room. He locks the door, then, after a pause, hands her the key. She takes it without comment. They descend the stairs in the lamplight. She is washing the supper dishes by the back window when she hears him return to the kitchen. He sets something on the table. The sound is small and specific, metal on wood, deliberate, the sound of a considered act. She does not turn immediately. She finishes the cup in her hands, sets it on the drain board, dries her hands on the cloth hanging from the stove rail. Then she turns. The pocket watch lies on the kitchen table. Silver, the case worn smooth at the edges from decades of handling, a small dent on the back near the hinge. She has seen the chain before, that faint glint at the vest pocket, present every day since she arrived, never drawn out, never opened. The one item on his person that his plainness of dress made no attempt to conceal, and yet somehow no one appeared to remark on. She looks at the watch. She looks up. He is already at the door. His hand is on the frame, and he has the posture of a man who has placed something irretrievable on a table and is now calculating, in the space of a breath, whether he will stay for whatever comes next. He stays. That watch, he says, without turning, Was my father's before it was mine. He wound it every night before he slept. I wound it every night since I was 17 years old. He is quiet for a moment. I wound it this morning. I wound it the morning before that. I wound it every morning since June. He turns then. His face is what it always is, angled and sun-carved and offering nothing that hasn't been decided. I don't reckon I've been clear about why. You haven't, she says. He holds her gaze. The morning you walked 9 miles to that lawyer's office and 9 miles back on a boot that was held together by 10 days of my stitching, you didn't ask me. Didn't tell me what you'd done until it was done. He stops, starts again. A woman who acts like that. She's not here for the land. No, Nora says. She isn't. The lamplight sits between them on the kitchen table beside the watch. Outside, the valley has gone fully dark. The cottonwoods are invisible beyond the north fence, present only as sound. The low, continuous conversation of leaves in wind that Nora has come to know the way she knows the difference between Lily's two kinds of silence. He crosses the room. There is a pause in his step, brief but real, before he picks up the watch, holds it out. She takes it. The weight of it in her palm is the weight of the thing it represents, which is not small. He does not release it immediately. For a moment they are both holding it. I'm not a man of easy words, he says. I reckon you've noticed. I've noticed, she says. I don't require them. He lets go of the watch. 3 days later, a rider appears at the south gate in the early afternoon. Nora is in the garden. She straightens when she hears the hoofbeats, one hand shielding her eyes against the September light. The horse is a roan she does not recognize. The man on it wears the clean clothes of a courier, not a rancher. A coat with a company insignia at the pocket, a bag slung across the saddle. He holds out an envelope. It is heavy paper, cream-colored, sealed with red wax bearing the impression of a stamp she does not recognize, a legal firm seal, the kind used by offices in large cities that deal in matters requiring formality. The address on the front is written in careful black ink. Not Nora Merritt, Nora Calloway. She takes it. The courier touches his hat and turns his horse back down the road without another word. Nora stands at the garden gate and holds the envelope and looks at the seal. Denver, the return address reads. A law office, a name she does not know. Someone in a city 300 miles away knows exactly where she is, not what she has become in the past 3 months, not the name registered in the county ledger, the name she arrived with, the name that belongs to the life she left behind in St. Louis. Who sent it? Caleb is standing at the barn door. She does not know when he arrived there. His eyes are on the envelope, on the seal, on the address written in that careful black hand. His face is the controlled face, the face that reveals nothing about what it is working to contain. I don't know yet, she says. He says nothing more. He goes back into the barn. She hears the ordinary sounds resume, the horse, the harness, the hayfork, all of it continuing as it always continues, because the ranch does not pause for the things that arrive unbidden. That night, Nora sits at the small writing table in her room with the sealed envelope on the surface before her and the lamp burning low. She holds it a long time without opening it. Through the floor, she can hear the ordinary sounds of the house settling into sleep. The fire in the downstairs hearth. The creak of the porch board that always speaks once around 9 o'clock. The particular silence that means Lily is asleep. She is still sitting at the table at midnight when she hears footsteps in the hallway beyond her door. She goes still. The steps pass, move toward the top of the stairs. Pause. Settle. She listens. On the other side of the wall, for the first time since June, it is Caleb Merritt who cannot sleep. It is his weight on the hallway floorboards. It is his footsteps she can hear making their slow circuit between the staircase and the locked room door and back again, back and forth, in the dark hours before dawn. Nora sets the envelope at the edge of the table. She looks at the seal one last time, the Denver stamp, the name she was given at birth, the particular weight of a past that apparently has not finished making its claims. She picks up the lamp. She goes to the door. She opens it.